Hello there, this is How to Murder Time, a podcast about books and things.
Hello, everybody.
Watcher.
Hello.
We're back again with another book one. And Dr. Torag's here, who's joining us.
Hello there. Yes, I'm still here, hanging on.
Yep. So this time we go with John's pick. This is Philip K. Dick's Man in the High Castle, which was the winner from 1963, the Hugo novel winner. I think it was just novel back then. There wasn't all the various length categories back then. And I'll go with the back of the book to set the mood. Philip K. Dick's acclaimed cult novel gives us a horrifying glimpse of an alternative world, one where the Allies have lost the Second World War. In this nightmare dystopia, the Nazis have taken over New York, the Japanese control California, and the African continent is virtually wiped out. In a neutral buffer zone that divides the rival superpowers in America lives the author of an underground bestseller. His book offers a new vision of reality, giving hope to the disenchanted. Can other better worlds really exist? So what follows is basically a kind of alternative history type novel where the Nazis won the Second World War. The whole story is set in the Californian, what's known as the Pacific States of America, which is the bit conquered and occupied by the Japanese at the end of the Second World War, and also in the Rocky Mountain States, which is a sort of neutral buffer zone section in the centre of America, which keeps the two conquered parts of America apart.
Because no one wants the Midwest. When you've captured America, you just still leave it alone.
Well, I think also the end of the Second World War, neither the Japanese nor the Germans wanted to be having a border across America, so they essentially divided up a middle section as a buffer zone. I think is the idea there. We don't really get to see much about the United States of America, which is the name retained by the East Coast portion occupied by the Nazis. Most of the story takes place in the California section and in the Rocky Mountain area, and we follow several characters through a sort of a whimsical, meandering series of events that are quite difficult to follow, to be honest, quite difficult to explain. I almost ran into trouble with this.
I struggled.
So
and I always struggle if there's several different sort of stories going on one after another, because what happens is it gives you a bit of story, and then just as soon as you get interested, it forgets about it until you've got bored of it, and then it brings it back. Yeah, so you're always getting to a point where it starts to get interesting, and then they leave it.
Yeah, so I'll have a go at trying to sort of step through the basics of what happens. So you've got several characters there. There's a chap called Bob Children, who is an antique dealer who specialises in Americana, in old Wild West bits and pieces, which the occupying Japanese sort of ruling class tend to love and go mad for, and have got a real thing about sort of historically authentic bits of Wild West cowboy guns, that sort of thing, and old signs and diner signs, that sort of thing. And so he's made this chap's made quite a living by running an antique shop and sourcing and then selling these bits of the lost, vanished America to the occupying Japanese, who have a kind of fascination with the culture that they've themselves come in and essentially begun to supplant, certainly on the West Coast. He's not a very likable character at all, and he's extremely racist in his own personal views and stuff. He sort of works hard to try and appease the ruling Japanese and try to get in their good books and adopt their mannerisms and stuff, all the while having this really sort of hypocritical streak within him, where he's essentially an inner monologue where he's constantly sort of going on about how they not liking them and that sort of thing. Then you've got a chap called Frank Frink, who's a metal worker who works in a factory, who are turning out fake American artifacts, fake Americana, and selling on to Bob Children. And Children doesn't know that they're faked, and sort of later in the novel he gets this pointed out by one of the Japanese who has a valuation done, and this is a sort of source of enormous personal shame and so on. But Frink is basically trying to sort of get out of the metal workshop and start his own jewellery business, and he ends up blackmailing his boss about the fake antiques so that he can get some money to start a factory, and starts making jewellery, which the Japanese seem to really like. You got Juliana Frink, who is his ex-wife, and she starts. We meet her in Colorado, in the sort of Rocky Mountain area. She's a judo instructor who has become fascinated with a novel that turns up within the book, a sort of book within the book, as it were, called The Grasshopper Lies Heavy. And this novel portrays, it's a kind of banned, prescribed book. It's kind of an underground book sort of thing, and it's a novel about an alternative reality where the Allies won the Second World War. Now, I don't know if that's specifically meant to be our world, our real history, or whether that's yet another parallel world.
It's not quite the same, because things started to go awry just before the Second World War.
And so she's become increasingly fixated with this book, and has sort of taken on a kind of personal mission to find the author, who is known as the Man in a High Castle, which is essentially the title drop there. He's the author of The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, this sort of improbably realistic. I mean, she utterly believes that this thing is real, but can't quite work out how and why. So sort of conceives a sort of mission, a quest, as it were, to go off and find this man in a high castle and try and work out why he knows so much about this other world, and how he's got so detailed about it all.
She is a bit touched, though. She's not entirely with it the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that she buys into this and believes it utterly doesn't necessarily mean it's one of the great novels of all time.
No, but it certainly sort of
confused.
It almost takes on I suppose a sort of quasi-religious aspect. She sort of invests a lot of herself and a belief into this book. I suppose it portrays a better world. It's a kind of escapism from her sort of somewhat dreary life, and how the world all around her is generally quite a grim and sort of dilapidated, faded place.
Also, the author's a bit of a focus. He's a guy, the guy who is the man in the high castle, who people tend to seem to look up to or hold in a kind of awe.
Yeah. There's all sorts of rumours. The reason he's called the Man in the High Castle is because there's rumours that he lives in a sort of a fortified compound with all sorts of guards and sort of defences and so on, largely because he believes, and I think rightly as it turns out, that the Nazis are out to get him because he's essentially writing propaganda against the course of events that have put them in charge. So he has this reputation of being really hard to track down and so on. Then there's another sort of strand going on with a chap called Baines, who is a Swedish industrialist we get introduced to quite early on, who's on a business trip to the trade delegation in San Francisco from Europe, from Germany. And there's this really sort of quite drawn-out sort of business meeting that needs to be set up between himself and, I think, Nobusuke Tagomi, who's essentially the sort of ranking Japanese trade official in San Francisco. And he's trying to arrange a meeting between Baines and a higher-up from mainland Japan as well. And there's a lot of hush-hush stuff going on. And almost immediately there's more going on here than just some sort of trade negotiations going on. So that sort of develops throughout the novel as well, and that sort of turns out to sort of become. I'm trying to remember it all. It's quite a strange book in that it didn't really leave any sort of stark, straight trail of narrative through. There's a lot of small byways and cul-de-sacs going on in the prose I found.
That's Philip K. Dick all over.
Yes,
isn't it?
Yeah. But I think it turns out that Baines is essentially, it turns out to be actually a Nazi defector, and he's trying to warn.
No, he's not a defector. He's part of one of the many cliques inside the Nazi government who happens to not want to destroy Japan.
Yes.
Not a defector from the Nazi government.
So sort of more of a subtle politics thing going on there, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But yes, there's a large plan in the offing to carry out a surprise attack, probably nuclear. I can't remember if it was actually specified, but on the Japanese home islands. Basically, the Nazis, having had 20, 30, 40 years to regroup and recover and carry out all sorts of atrocities on the African continent, and now ready to press the global domination plan and attack Japan suddenly out of nowhere as a surprise attack. And casts a sort of pall, a kind of ominous foreshadowing over the entire sort of events, because even before this plan's revealed, you get the sense that geopolitically things are not settled, things are not content and ready to move on. So you get this this sort of large, high stakes diplomatic negotiation thing going on in one side, and Tagomi ends up managing to thwart the attempt by some Nazi secret police to come in and arrest Baines and take him away, and just to shoot them down with an antique American pistol that he bought from Bob Children in the end, I think. And there's not much more beyond that with the fallout from that. We don't really hear much more about how that works. I think Baines ends up going back to Europe, and that's it. Whether the plan's thwarted or not, we don't know. Meanwhile, Juliana then hooks up with a chap called Joe Sinadella, who's an Italian-American truck driver, and ends up starting a bit of a fling with him. And he is quite fascinated by the whole Man in a High Castle as well, and they go together to find the guy. And he turns out to be really easy to find. It's like, just an inquiry in a phone book or something, doesn't it, in the end? And then
because he'd been built up to be something way more than he was.
Yes. So then Cinderella sort of starts to change his mannerisms and becomes a bit more professional about it all, which alerts Juliana to the possibility that he's probably a Nazi assassin. And so she ends up attacking him in a hotel room and leaves him for dead, and then carries on her own to find the Man in the High Castle. And then the sort of it's difficult to call it a denouement, difficult to call it a resolution, because
and then the events run out.
Juliana, spoiler alert, Juliana basically meets the Man in the High Castle, who's actually a chap called Hawthorne Abinson, who just lives in a little rural suburban estate. Apparently he did used to live in a fortress, but it was a lot of hassle, and no one was coming for him, so he moved to somewhere a bit more normal. And so she sort of barges in during a dinner party and confronts him about the book and quizzes him and so on. And he basically confesses to the fact that the book was written but with the use of the I Ching, which is the you throw your yarrow stalks or coins and read the paragraphs of fortune telling. And he was using that as his primary mechanism to write The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, which I suppose Juliana then interprets to mean that the truth wrote the book rather than a piece of fiction from a man. It's somehow the divination and from the I Ching had managed to predict more or less the events that we see as our actual history, and then it sort of stops.
Oh no! No, right at the end. Yep. Then it turns out, according to the author of The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, that she is not human, actually a fairy creature.
Oh, wow. I sort of picked up. I thought that was just a metaphor. I don't know.
The thing is, they were talking about the I Ching magic as if it was real.
Yes.
He seemed to genuinely believe some sort of
spirit.
I don't know, Irish spirit fairy thing, which had come. The magic had brought her here because she was just her decisions took her, and she had no plans. And then she just happened to kill an assassin just as she was dancing around, and then she wandered out of it and disappeared again. And you think, oh, good God, that was they added a bit too much magic that they weren't sure about. They sort of treated it as real, but I'm not sure whether anyone was sure it was real.
Yeah. I mean, regular listeners will probably realise I'm having a bit of trouble with this one. Is this a Philip K. Dick thing? Is this? I mean,
Philip K. Dick is weird, and some are better than others. And in my opinion, this is not one of his best. But this is the one that won the Hugo.
Yes, this is I mean, it's not just this mishmash nonsense of psychedelic themes and imagery that go nowhere and have been clearly written by someone off their head on drugs or anything. There are whole sections of quite well constructed scene. I suppose scenes is what you get. You get scenes connected in no real
I'm of the opinion that Philip K. Dick shines best when he's doing short stories.
Yeah,
That's where all of the good books that turned into films have come from. That's where all the memorable things tend to be. And the bigger books, although they have their moments, and some of them are quite good, tend to get bogged down with weird ideas quite quickly. And this just feels like lots of ideas for short stories in a shared universe, maybe which could have been formatted better in a more coherent way.
Yeah, I mean, when you describe it like that makes absolute sense. Yeah, that it does come across as essentially as a very small set of shorts. It's almost like a short story anthology, some of which the events carry over into other short stories. It's all small vignettes, small scenes, and those scenes
easier to read.
Yeah, those scenes are very well painted as well. They're very detailed, very very evocative. They really are well fleshed out, and you you totally buy into the situation and each particular scene, the people, their motivations, their inner monologues, and so on. But as a I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm expecting from a novel a kind of journey, a kind of A to B to C to D. A kind of story. And that seems to be the one thing that is nebulous, if non-existent in here, really. And it's hard to read.
It would have been a lot easier if he'd just, in each of the short stories, and had the beginning, middle, and end of each of those as separate chapters. It would have been a lot easier to read. It would have seemed a lot more coherent and organised and thoughtful, rather than writing a bit of a short story isn't necessarily overly furnished with plot anyway, and then moving away from it and coming back to it 2 chapters later when you've forgotten about it. All the writing is very, very good, but the coherence is really lacking.
Which I suspect might be Philip K. Dick all over, really.
Absolutely. To me, it felt like a very well organised and well formatted campaign background book for a D&D campaign. You have the little insert stories that can be quite well written. You've got little images and bits that sort of show you the world. You've got this is the history, because they had that. They had Basil exposition front and centre for a chapter where some Japanese official came in and shouted out who all the Nazis were, and some of them are from real history, and some of them they may be made up for this story, but nonetheless, it was sort of bullet points of all the Nazis, and so it did feel like they were just writing facts so you could make a campaign out of it.
Because I wonder if that's actually what the exercise here was. I mean, I don't know anything at all about actual writing, but I'm guessing, if you're writing a massive, long, doorstopper series, you're going to have some kind of, what's the phrase, not styled Bible, some sort of campaign. I guess I'm thinking more almost of Tolkien, to be honest. The sort of reams and reams and reams of notes that were mostly for his own continuity, for his own reference when he was putting together Lord of the Rings and whatever, which then get published decades after his death under the unfinished tales. But the idea of an author doing a lot of background research and doing preparatory work of small stories and the exposition dumps and so on as a sort of building blocks for his own work, and this feels like that it was the preparatory work for an actual massive novel with a proper story. And I don't know. Does that seem feasible? It comes across as notes in a way. Very good notes. But
if it's somebody else, I think that's absolutely what it could. Not sure that Philip K. Dick ever had the wherewithal to create a story inside a novel. He just this is as good as he got. He just did really well written sort of jewels, and then he just gave us a bag of jewels. He didn't give us a story.
Which leads to so many short stories being turned into Hollywood movies.
Because I certainly agree with John about the short stories. I think they're far better than his novels. He gets a bit lost when he's asked to write more than 30 pages.
We end up with sort of a series of short stories that is all held together sort of loosely. Yeah.
It's very well written. Yeah. It really is very well written. I certainly can sort of, with no doubt about that at all.
But all of this is why this is the one which was suited to be turned into a TV show. Mm-hmm. It's ideal. It basically is the Sears Bible for a TV show if you were to do it. And it turns out they have now.
Yeah, in a way, that is series Bible. That's perhaps the phrase I was looking for. Yeah, it's like it is a preparatory text for a more ambitious and lengthier and involved work. And I suppose the TV show, yeah. I mean, I've seen one episode of that. I don't have the right sort of television to watch most of this stuff, and I don't watch a lot of telly anyway, but I think I caught the first episode around a friend's house with space telly, all the cables and Netflixes and what have you.
It's Amazon, but go ahead.
Yes. Damn, he's called my bluff on television. But yeah, and I was just watching through that, and I watched that, and that was good, fair enough. And I came back and I read through this, and I thought, wow, just comparing that first one episode, I think in that first episode, they get through about 3/4 of this book. Just in that one episode. And this is a series of however many episodes, I don't know, 6, 13, 28, or whatever.
They also managed to get through that much and add so much more weight to the story.
Oh, they had to add a load more as well, yeah. In particularly on the TV show, you get a lot more backstory about New York and the Nazi-occupied side of things, and that isn't even touched in this book at all. You get some hints and some dark rumours about what goes on in Europe.
The Nazi side isn't very nice, and actually the Japanese side is the better side to be on.
Yeah, yeah. But you get sort of vague asides about how they've drained the Mediterranean and turned it into farmland, and how they're actually on the moon and on Mars and Venus and stuff.
Project,
Yeah, well, I guess, and there's all sorts of horrifically dark, ominous stuff about Africa, about how essentially being literally burned, scorched. I don't know.
That felt very real. It really, the racism in this book felt like he meant it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it might well be that's not, but it certainly was believably meant.
But not talking comedic Indiana Jones Nazis here at all, no.
No, it reminds me of when I was growing up in Germany in the sort of 70s, and my sort of talking to people, and my dad talking to people who'd been there during the war. And then seeing the Americans and the Allies coming in and occupying the country. Because essentially the British Army, when I was there, were the occupation still. By then they were defending the Germans against the Russians, but nonetheless. And they had said they couldn't believe how well they were treated by the Americans and the British when they came in, invaded. They didn't occur.
They were
to
just
them
expecting
that anyone
much worse.
It didn't occur to them that anyone would be that nice to them after the war, which does paint quite a good illustration that if they'd won, then probably wouldn't have been as pleasant being in German-occupied countries.
So this must have been a hard thing to write and do the research for. Then, if he's sort of painting such a bleak picture, he must have gone into some of the details, gone into quite a bit of detail with what actually went on during the Second World War. I mean, I sort of found an interesting snippet on Wikipedia there, which basically he said he'd started several times to write a sequel, but progressed little because he was too disturbed by his original research and could not mentally bear to go back and read about Nazis again. Which sort of suggests that he probably didn't enjoy a lot of that, the background research for the book, and probably that comes across somewhere in the writing, the sort of grimness of the Nazis side of things. I mean, as you say, the Japanese almost seem quite benevolent by comparison. They're running false on the west coast of America, but generally seem to treat the country well. The people seem to get on with the
but they're still not nice. They're only better in reflection to the other side, and I think that's an interesting comparison. Using the Germans to make them look not quite so bad, and how people can adjust to situations when it could be a bit worse.
It could be worse, yeah, absolutely. It's sort of got that all over it, this book, But then life doesn't seem like a sort of a happy-go-lucky utopia in the Rocky Mountain area as well. That comes across as quite a sort of weary, tired, dilapidated sort of place without much in the way of prospects or central drive, I suppose.
It also seemed to suggest that the colour or the race relations in America, which was a real struggle in reality for decades after the war, in this, it feels like the white over race one, and they definitely treated they were viewing blacks as these subordinate slave race all over America, whether it was in the United States or in the bit that wasn't anybody's or in the bits that were Japanese. The black people were slaves, I think, which is also disturbing.
Yeah, I think it's very dystopian, certainly applies.
Yeah. It was just basically horrid to live in this version of the future. It was very well written. It definitely felt real, but it's not a nice place to spend any time. No wonder they all sort of bought into this alternate reality.
Yeah,
the alternate reality was a bit grotesque, but better than this.
So The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, I suppose, is presented as a science fiction within this book, but it seems sort of the real world is so bad, and that it paints such a hopeful alternate reality that clearly a lot of people are buying into this, and to the point where Juliana just ups sticks and goes on a pilgrimage to try and find the guy who wrote it just to get some answers. Perhaps she believes that there's a way to access this other world, perhaps, or at least find out something hopeful from the man who's writing this stuff.
I mean, thinking about it, because there wasn't much in the way of it's perfect for the TV series, because normally if you have a film or a book of a TV, all the people that love the book will rail against any change from the original story. And in this, really not going to find it easy to rail for sort of, well, there's 24 episodes or 12 episodes, but you missed out this plot. No. Literally, you there's not enough plot for them to keep going for 12 episodes with this. Very much
an exercise for the viewer, I suppose, an exercise for whoever's adapting the thing. You've got a lot of blank canvas to work with. I mean, it's the same with a lot of the Philip K. Dick adaptations. I mean, I'm thinking Total Recall. Both Total Recall films came out of essentially a one-scene business. It's just the bit in the memory parlour. That's it. That's the we can remember it for you wholesale. And again, the Do Androids Dream. That's a lot. That's nearer the film. But again, it's
a lot is cut out from the book. All of the weird religion aspects.
Yes.
Although the film does touch on what is real, the book is way more what is real. As is this book, actually. This book is very much the theme of, is this the right reality, or is the reality of the book the actual reality? Yes. Is this person who he says it is? One of them is making fake antiques. It's all unreal
perceived
things.
Reality, yeah. He then goes on to make jewellery, which the Japanese fellow has an almost supernatural experience when he sees this weird jewellery that Frank Frink's just made up out of the top of his head. And I think at one point he ends up having some sort of spirit vision of a San Francisco from The Grasshopper Lies Heavy when he's sort of using the jewellery as a focus or something. It was, yes.
That was, and I have a trouble with that of pontificating about art when it's real art. It's just a problem I have in reality with anyone that talks that much about art.
Yes.
But when it's talking about fake art in a story, and they spend longer on that they do on murder, killing, and bombing the world. Oh God, it took too long.
The art was probably an allegory for drugs.
Well, that's probably
pretty much has to be with Dick,
when it's Dick, usually it's either drugs or paranoia.
Well, it does feel like a Philip K. Dick novel. Yeah, there's a lot of sort of unpleasant thoughts and the perception of realities that comes up, and the escapism of it all, and the sort of hiding from people who are not who they say they are. That sort of thing's sort of threading through it all as well.
The only thing is, in Philip K. Dick novels, normally the paranoid person at the end who's built a castle, he would have been a lot more paranoid, because he wasn't really laying on the paranoia very thickly in this version of the world.
Well, it wasn't so much paranoia because it had actually happened. It's almost like you're sort of thinking about what's the worst could happen if these events went wrong, and then just spin it all the way out, which I suppose is good sort of interpretive, speculative fiction. But
I really struggled to work out who to like in this book, because there were a lot of people that, I mean, you're right, Childen is not a pleasant person in the least. He's very difficult to think anything nice about him. But some of the others were I sort of like them. I sort of like the Japanese characters. I think all of them came across, because you interior monologues, they seem to be certainly...
They're trying to do right by the people they're governing.
Vaguely nice people. And incidentally, you said that some Japanese person had pointed out the fakes in children's store. No,
but he
it
doesn't
wasn't.
expose him.
It was Frank.
Oh.
Frink, who went there as the subordinate of a imaginary Japanese admiral, who said, "No, this is fake," and he knew that because he'd made it.
Oh,
so he was trying to.
They pull a sort of scam, don't they? Yeah.
He was trying to weaken children's position so that when they came with real stuff,
yes,
with the art that he'd made, they'd have a chance of selling it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's quite labyrinthine, that, and doesn't really appear to go anywhere either at the end of it all. I mean, if you had to say, does the book have a protagonist? I suppose it's Juliana and a bid to try and find out what's going on with the book. But again, that doesn't really sort of it has a bit of movement, and then it sort of coasts to a halt at the end again.
Well, no one really grows in this. No one comes away with it having learnt a lesson and made themselves a better person.
No. I mean, even the man in High Castle himself is largely bemused by the whole thing at the end, isn't he?
Frink at the end of it's in a better position than he was at the beginning, because he'd just been fired and he was shouting racist abuse at his and then his manager leaves the boss with him, and they end up setting up this, and the Japanese really like what they're doing, so they see a future for them.
Started a small jewelry business that looks like it's going to go well.
It sort of feels like his life is better at the end than it was at the beginning, and he nearly got put in the gas chambers, and then very odd happenstance happened to get out of it. All things are. The I Ching touch things and links them together. So if only because Tagomi had seen his art, it changed his perception of the world, and therefore he freed this Jew who was going to. It's just I'm sure in Dick's mind there was a direct connection between creating the art, changing this man's mind, and then being freed from prison.
Yeah, I mean,
it didn't hang into the story enough to make sense.
Is there context we're missing here? I mean, partly, yes, this is Philip K. Dick, but this was also written in 1963. This was the winner. So is this a product of its time, do we think? Or
I was a bit confused as to whether...
So we're going quite far back into the Hugos now. I mean, this was only 10 years after the Hugos started. They started in 53. This is 63's winner. And
I was a bit baffled.
50 or more years old.
Is the I Ching viewed as really magic? Is it really connecting you to alternate realities?
I don't know. They take a lot of...
Really...
I don't think they believe
it's... people.
I don't think they believe it's scientifically provably true, but I think they rely on it as a kind of... flip. It's a sort of, it seems to be used as a kind of way of abdicating responsibility for picking your own course and making your own decisions. The I Ching says do this. Essentially, they use it as a kind of in-depth flipping a coin. Yeah,
but the answers they got for it all the way through always seemed to be the author pointing things out to the characters rather than it.
So the I Ching as a mechanism.
Dick did say that he used the I Ching to help write the book, and that's why the ending doesn't go anywhere, because it just stopped talking to him. So if you are basically rolling a dice to write a book, it's going to be a little bit weird.
So is this become a sort of choose your own adventure?
He was trying to sell it. So
yeah, it's probably completely untrue.
Well, yeah, who knows? But yeah, an odd thing. So John, you chose this one for us. Why pick this one out of the list of the Hugos? Is it purely because the Philip K. Dick connection then?
Yeah, and also the whole concept behind it is slightly more interesting than the usual Hugo fare, because you get an awful
the big space operas.
Yeah, you get an awful lot of the space operas. You don't get an awful lot of alternate history stuff, and there was alternate history before this, but there was a lot more after it, partially because this was successful and interesting. It opened up the floodgates to a lot of books.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I guess you'd seen a lot of up to that point, particularly with the Second World War, because, I mean, you'd need a bit of time, bit of water under the bridge before people start writing about it anyway, and then oh gosh, that's quite daring. How about what we speculate about what happens if Hitler had won? Yeah. Hitler, by the way, during this story is incapacitated with syphilis, and I think Martin Bormann is the Chancellor. There's as you say, exposition dump, D&D campaign, source book type stuff. There's a big old list of what happens to make things go wrong. I think it all diverges from our reality when Roosevelt gets assassinated in 1933, and then which causes the Great Depression to continue on into World War II, which stops America getting involved in anything, and the rest is not history, as they say. But so we don't actually see any other Philip K. Dick nominated for Hugo's.
Flow My Tears, the people said is nominated.
Okay, I've not come across that one.
Which is it's a set in a dystopian version of 1988, I think. So yeah, it's another alternate future in this case one, which is only slightly removed from now.
Mm-hmm. I suppose you could call Do Androids Dream an alternate reality one now? Does that not set in 1987 or 2017, something like that?
2017, isn't it?
2017, Blade Runner. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the book actually says when it's set, but the film is.
The film is, yeah. Because I mean, I come across this kind of thing with Robert Harris's Fatherland. That's not Hugo at all, but runs on a similar premise. That's sort of set in the 60s when, after Germany had won the Second World War, and sort of starts off as a kind of police procedural and then sort of develops into a very dark direction there as you go. And similar kind of world-building exercise, which I suppose must be quite fascinating, but also, quite grim, quite hard work. There's a massive sort of appendix to Fatherland where Harris actually starts, listing out all the people he'd written about and that, if they were real or not and what actually happened to them and so on. It must take quite a toll writing this kind of work, trying to imagine the worst of what could possibly have gone wrong in history.
Yeah, especially if you're somebody of a certain disposition like Dick was. If
you already think the government are out to get you and have quite a lot of drugs. Yes.
And of course, famously, the government actually were out to get him. So it's not really paranoia if they are breaking into a house and having a look around.
Yeah, well. So have you seen the TV show, John?
That's the interesting thing. I saw the pilot, which is the episode you saw.
I think so.
But I never got around to watching the rest of it.
I'm sure you got the Amazon stuff.
Yeah, no, I've got full access to both seasons. And at a click of a button, I could watch it. I've just never done it. And I don't know why, because, I really do like Philip K. Dick. I like this novel. I don't like reading this novel, but I like this novel.
That is, that's sort of what I was getting as well. It feels like an important and interesting and useful win, but
I love the ideas.
To sit down and read through it.
I love everything about it, apart from the actual book. And so I should be watching the TV show. I don't know, there's something about the whole weight of the TV show that makes me not quite want to dive in unless I'm in the perfect mood, and I haven't been in that perfect mood for the 2 years since it started. So I don't know when that'll happen.
In a way, this is exactly like Eve. Eve is fantastic to talk about and hear stories about, but you don't actually want to spend your time in there
Eve Online?
Having the shit out of you. Yeah, Eve Online. And this, talking about it, watching a TV show about it is fantastic. I'm glad I read it. There's a lot to say and there's a lot to admire in the superb brilliance of the writing, but I'd rather talk about it than read it.
Yeah, now I think about it, I'm pretty sure I've read this before. It must have been about like 5 or 10 years ago, and I don't remember anything about what happened in it at all, which is terrible. I mean, I think I just about remember that I'd read it. And obviously I've reread it recently again for this show, and I can feel it fading already. It's the themes and the idea of it that are really powerful and interesting, but the actual execution, I suppose, is less memorable, is harder to get behind, I think.
the world is a lot stronger than the plot, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, sort of thinking about the TV show, I'm just thinking, wow, if they got that far through the written work in that pilot one episode and still had to add all that extra sort of B plot with the New York side and the
But you don't need
the
any
Nazi
of the other
prosecutor
plots.
guy.
The world itself is so full of plots.
Well, I was
they can just use.
wondering, what do they do for the next sort of 7 or 8 episodes? Where does that go? Because interestingly, in the TV show, it's actually film, isn't it? It's not just the book, this Grasshopper Lies heavy book. There's actually newsreel that they're watching. Yeah, which I suppose makes it a bit more. I suppose it opens up the possibility that there could actually be an reality, assuming that it's practically very difficult to fake film reel in that time period in the 60s or whenever it's set. So I don't know. I'd have to
the TV show probably has or will have a lot more resolution than this book does have. And I can't say if the TV show does because I haven't watched it, but I know the book has no resolution. Whether or not the alternate universe is real and it's sort of poking through reality somehow, and that's where the book came from, we don't know. Yeah.
So are you saying that what this TV series really desperately needs is J.J. Abrams at the wheel? So
No.
it never has a resolution. It's lost and confused.
Nothing
exactly
needs
the same way
J.J.
as the book.
Abrams at the wheel.
I think what you need for this to be a film or TV show is a screenplay writer who's not afraid to take the source material and then really make a go of it of their own, really not afraid to add their own ideas and significantly change it up even. Because I'm just not sure an absolutely faithful adaptation of this book would make for, coherent, let alone good viewing, you know?
Well, famously, they tried to make it into a film a couple of times before it ended up as a TV show. And I do not think this would work as a film.
Well,
because you can't adapt this book as a film because, one, it would be 4 films and 4 short films, and a
lot of people wandering out the cinema at the end going, what? Yeah.
So are they going to, in the TV series, have Juliana as a fairy? Are they going to have vampires and werewolves? And,
I think we're moving back into magic realism again. Yes,
Buffy the Vampire Slayer in a Nazi-occupied New York.
Well, judo instructing, fairy kicking ass, and Nazi occupied. Yeah, I mean, you could probably have some fun with this, but
and you could say it's all in the book.
and it being a Philip K. Dick adaptation, no one could convincingly prove that you were wrong. No, it could be anything at all.
I'm sure that some of the listeners have actually watched the TV show and know the answer to this. But I don't want to collapse that waveform. I want to believe that it either could or couldn't be possible.
I think you need to take one for the show. You need to sit down and box set binge this, get to the bottom of what the hell is going on here.
I'll do a follow-up on one of the later episodes.
So really, tell us, John, what was that really all about? Yeah, it's a strange thing. It feels important, it feels worthy, but it feels, from my position as an enthusiastic Philistine, I did sort of come away from the end of it all going, well, what was that all about? And just scenes, pastiches, glimpses and visions of, and it really is about the world building and not really so much about a sort of tale of anything particular, Strange thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've read a few Philip K. Dick stories because I like the films and things that they were based on. And this has left me less irritated than almost anything else of his I've ever read.
Oh, wow. So a lot of these are worse than this in that regard.
Well, not worse.
Well,
it's just
worse, perhaps the wrong word.
A lot of them are not to my taste. And this
they're spiky.
This one just hit the right spot for me. It was hard work, but I can see the beauty in it. I can see the
that's
talent.
The thing. I mean, anyone else, you'd just pass it off as bad writing, but it's really good at the short scenes, and the thought-provoking character dialogues and inner monologues and so on. It's just the sort of, I don't know, perhaps he struggles with the long form. I don't know. Are any of his works what you might consider to be door stoppers, or are they all essentially short stories?
I don't think you go to long. Yeah, they were all fairly short.
Yeah, they don't get massively big. I can't think of one. I can't see one on the shelf.
So I've got it here. This one is 250 pages, just about.
Which is a nice length for a book.
Well, it seems way too long, I think, for what he's trying to do.
Nice length for a normal book.
I mean, I personally, I love massive sort of 700-page doorstoppers anyway, but I couldn't see. I just wouldn't want another sort of another thing 3 times as long as this, with the same sort of stuff going on and the same sorts of non-resolutions. And
if he wrote
meandering.
any more, he'd just have put another 500 pages about Tagomi being lost in, in his own contemplation of a piece of jewellery. I'm not sure I want another 500 pages of that, to be honest.
So, John, what other Philip K. Dick would you rather have seen here in this slot? Is this his best?
Well, yeah, I would have liked to have seen We Can Remember a Few Wholesale nominated, because that actually is a very interesting book.
I've read that relatively recently, and that is a lot more of a coherent narrative to it.
Yeah.
There is a story to that. I mean, there is a lot of messing with your head goes on in there, particularly the business with the whole fake police station halfway through, but which doesn't turn up in the film, as I recall. But,
as an aside, at work, I discovered we have an alternate office in the same town, and now I feel exactly like I'm from that book.
Oh wow,
Am I the fake office or the real one?
So yeah, definitely the same sorts of themes, but it seemed that would have made for a better winner, I think. I don't know what year that was or what else squeezed it out.
Out of his other stuff, I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't think anything's really. I mean, stuff like Valis or something is. I don't think Hugo material. Although it's interesting, it's not Hugo material. Like I said before. In my view, his strengths can be best summed up by the short story collections that are out there, which are some of the best books that I think that you can buy in science fiction. Just the quality of his short stories are outstanding. As you can tell by just the number of films that have come out of them, just because of one scene makes a whole film, because that idea is so good.
He'll write one scene with a really, really good idea, and then he'll take that good idea and twist it in ways you hadn't thought of as well, and then that then goes on to become a fantastic film or whatever. But yeah, I think he's perhaps a bit lost in the long form genre. I think he's perhaps not well suited to it.
Well, the problem is he's not really meandering around an idea in this. When he's sort of meandering around the ideas of godhood or things like that, he has a bit more focus. But in this, he's lacking any real thing to hang it around. There's no. It's a geopolitical.
It's like
story.
trying to write a
psychological
war book,
story,
sort of a history book. But
it's not talking about state of mind or a state of imagination. He's talking about a state of the world.
It does sort of feel like he's somewhat out of his normal comfort zone when he's writing this. I know he wouldn't expect that in-depth research about the horrors of the Nazis is anyone's area of expertise. But yeah.
But I do think that makes it this probably his most mainstream book. Because, it's not completely out there and talking about crazy things.
Yeah.
And people can understand it.
I think,
Dick is
to be honest,
full out, it's pretty hard to just jump on if you're not really expecting it.
Yeah, but I think Philip K. Dick, people come to him for the crazy anyway, really. So expecting this as a Philip K. Dick book and then reading through and getting what you get, I think might be a bit of a letdown and perhaps not representative then, I guess. I haven't really read a lot of his stuff. But.
Yeah, this is much more unfocused. It is crazy.
Yeah.
And he's definitely more comfortable in Crazy Town.
Bizarrely, I'd say, while this is his most approachable book, it's probably not the one that you should approach.
Yeah.
Although you should approach it because the concepts behind it, everyone should read it at least once, I think.
Yeah. I think it's worth a look, see what you get out of it, but be prepared for something perhaps a bit unexpected and a bit unusual. Yeah.
And it does help if you've got a podcast to record afterwards.
Only read it if it's homework for a gig. Well, I'm not sure about that. Let's have a look at the other nominees for the year then. So this is 1963, and Philip K. Dick, Man in High Castle won. We also had Marion Zimmer Bradley, The Sword of Alderney. Anyone read that? I haven't.
Nope.
Okay. Arthur C. Clarke, A Fall of Moondust. That I have read. That is essentially a kind of disaster book. It's essentially about a lunar surface crawling vehicle, like a bus trip across the surface of the moon, and a moonquake releases a hitherto unknown pocket of gas under the thing, which basically causes it to collapse and disappear into the seas of dust on the moon. And it's essentially it becomes a sort of rescue story about getting out there and trying to rescue the passengers and crew of this bus thing, and also quite involved story about the interpersonal dramas and relationships of the people inside. It is a sort of classic disaster movie, shipwreck kind of thing, but with the added sort of sci-fi-ness of it all taking place on the moon. And it's quite hard science fiction. There's no sort of magic science dealing with any problems here. It's all relatively well thought out. I quite enjoyed that. I'm surprised that's not been turned into some sort of film or something by now. We've got H.B. Piper, Little Fuzzy. Don't know anyone.
Yeah, it's sort of a bit like sort of a kid's story, sort of thing. I had a copy of it for years and could never get through more than about a chapter of it. It's about some weird Ewok creature things that were cute and fluffy and about 2 foot tall, and it was
sounds like
pretty. Yeah, very much Ewok-y. And apparently, in 2011, John Scalzi, who we have previously encountered, published a reboot of the original story called Fuzzy Nation.
Okay.
Because there were several of these fuzzy stories, and they were all not for me.
Right. Fair enough.
I suspect this is a book I shall be missing.
Then we've got Gene Bruler's Silva. Again, not heard of it. I haven't read it. So yes, I don't know.
Well,
what
looking
else?
at those 5, you can see why he won.
It's certainly
because none of the others have lived long in the memory, have they?
I would have gone with The Fall of Moon Dust on more technical, conventional Hugo
You can't
basis.
give it to Clark every week.
Well, I don't know how many other goes he'd had. I mean, was there a sense perhaps that it was Philip K. Dick's turn to get one?
It was quite early on in his career.
It's 63.
He went on a long time after that.
So that was all quite new then for him.
Yeah, I mean, he'd been around, but I don't think he was quite as massive as he was.
He wasn't owed one.
I'm not sure they were very good at picking turns, because by this stage Heinlein had won it 3 times already in 10 years, and nobody else had got more than one. So
because Arthur C. Clarke then went on to win in 74 with Rendezvous with Rama, and possibly more beyond. I think Fountains of Paradise, yes, 1980. Arthur C. Clarke wins again.
There's a lot of oh God, Asimov hasn't got one. Quick, give him. What was it? It was.
Oh God!
Foundation.
Yes,
there was a Foundation nightmare.
Let me check. Yes, 1983. Asimov wins with Foundation's Edge, which is like a sequel after a sequel.
But Asimov had already won for the gods themselves.
Yes, and that is an interesting and odd one. We'll have to come back to that.
It didn't say Foundation in the title, so they couldn't. Just leave it at that.
The problem with Foundation, I guess any sci-fi readers worth their salt will have come across Asimov's Foundation series, but the short story that would go on to become the Foundation series was called The Mule, and that was actually one of the retro Hugos, which they started ordering in 1946. Asimov sort of comes up with the short story that then develops into the Foundation, the original trilogy. So, and that's one of these retro Hugos that they've started awarding to post, the previous ones that were outstanding before the Hugos begun. There's some good names in there as well. We've got Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. That's a retro Hugo. That was awarded for 54. T.H. White, Sword and a Stone, at 1939 retro Hugo. So they're sort of going backwards in time, awarding people who wrote outstanding sci-fi before the Hugos started.
You see, Sword and the Stone isn't sci-fi. It's definitely fantasy through and through. It's a cracking good book, though.
Sort of retelling of the Arthurian legends, isn't it? Yeah. So, so we better wrap up then.
And you didn't think we'd manage to fill an hour?
I honestly had trouble
pretty
because,
well.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm putting it down in the interesting but not fun category again, and there's a couple we've had in there so far.
We're not doing well on the old ripping yarns, are we?
No. Again, this is not really a massive sweeping space opera. So what do you think of it in a short sentence there, John?
Interesting, worthy, but maybe not something you need to return to.
Torag.
It's a great creation, but it's got no story.
Yeah, I totally agree. Right, well, so we'll be back with the book thing in another month. This next one, for those playing along at home, is Dan Simmons' Hyperion. This is my pick. I'm going to go with that one. It's I believe, the 1990 winner, so we're sort of coming forward a bit into the 90s. So yes, Hyperion by Dan Simmons. You can find that in your places you go to buy books. And we'll be about that in about a month's time. But until then, see you next time.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.